Hi everyone, it's Mrs. Burke. Today I'm going to show you how to write and solve a one variable equation to help you solve a word problem. Using the checklist, we're going to identify the four major components that you must have when you're asked to write and solve an equation in order to find some sort of thing in the word problem. The first thing is that you must define or identify the variable. There's going to be something that you know nothing about in the problem. So after you've read the problem, I want you to ask yourself, what do I know nothing about? A clue is that it usually comes at the end of one of the sentences. If necessary, you're going to use that same variable to identify anything else that is unknown. Anything else that you might not know everything about, but the one thing that you know nothing about is going to be your variable. You're going to use that variable to write an equation using some other context things within the problem. Then we're going to simplify and solve the equation and get a solution that might look something like x equals some number, and then interpret what that means depending on how you identified the variable so that you can write an answer statement with units or labels. As always, we have the same strategies for any word problem, like rereading, looking for keywords or phrases, underlining, making a table, drawing a picture, looking for a pattern. These are strategies that can be useful for any type of word problem. Let's try one out. Emily and her little sister measure their heights. Emily is 3 times as tall as her little sister. Their total heights are 84 inches tall. Write and solve an equation to find Emily and her little sister's heights. When I read it for the second time, I'm going to look for any key information and underline it. Emily and her little sister measure their heights. Emily is 3 times as tall as her little sister. Their total heights are 84 inches tall. Write and solve an equation to find Emily and her little sister's heights. You can see those 2 middle sentences are the most important and are going to help us to incorporate the 4 components in our answer. The first thing that we need to ask ourselves is, what is the thing we know absolutely nothing about? We know something about Emily's height because we know Emily is 3 times as tall as her little sister, but we don't know anything about her little sister's heights. And notice it comes at the end of that second sentence. So we're going to choose a variable. I'm going to use x to represent Emily's sister's height. Now we're going to use that same variable to represent Emily's height. We do know Emily's height is 3 times her little sister's height. So Emily's height is going to be 3 times x, since we made x her sister's height. We can write it as just 3x because a number next to a variable means multiplication. Next, we're going to use that next sentence, their total heights are 84 inches tall, the next clue that will help us to write an equation. So we've done the first thing on our checklist, which is to identify or define the variable. Our next thing is to solve to write an equation. So we're going to use Emily's height and her sister's height and this word total to equal the 84 in order to write our equation. Emily's sister's height is x. Emily's height is 3x. And the total, which clues us in, it's adding those 2 things together, is what's equal to 84. We have now done our second thing in our checklist, which is write the equation. Now on to the third thing, solving it. In order to solve this equation, we must simplify the equation first. We must put together the x and the 3x. Remember, there's an invisible 1 in front of the x. So we can add those together because they are like terms. They have the same variable, which becomes 4x. 4x equals 84. We're almost done. Now we need to look at what operation is happening with the variable. In between the number and the variable is an invisible multiplication. Because there's multiplication happening, we're going to do the opposite operation and we are going to divide both sides by 4 so that we can get x by itself. Therefore, x is equal to 21. Now our last step is to interpret what that means and write an answer statement. If x is 21, and originally we defined Emily's sister's height as x, we now know that Emily's sister's height is 21 inches tall. And we know that Emily's height is 3 times that. So we have to do a little bit extra math to figure out what Emily's height is. We're going to take Emily's sister's height and multiply that by 3 because Emily is 3 times the amount that her sister was to find out that Emily is 63 inches tall. We now have answered the question, which was to find Emily and her little sister's heights. And that is our final answer with the 4 different components of our answer.